I was reading that part because I just copied it from the Discord, and I didn't know what it actually said, so.
Nice.
Hello, friends, and welcome to another episode of Snark Squad Pod, the media podcast where half-assed research is our favorite kind of research. My name is Marines.
I'm Nicole Sweeney.
And today we are joined by a special guest because they're also special to us. It is Miriam. Miriam, introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Miriam. I talk about climate change on the internet a lot, and also really, really like Star Wars.
Those are two great things.
Branding, you know.
We asked Miriam to join us today to talk about 2017's The Last Jedi. Now, we talked about the first movie, which the name
The Force Awakens.
Yeah, The Force Awakens.
This is a good representation. We could do this over again, but I don't want to because this is a good representation of where Mari and I are at coming into Star Wars movies.
The rest of that sentence was going to be like, if you guys remember when we talked about The Force Awakens, Nicole and I are not really fans of Star Wars. So yes, we are back today with the second installment in the most recent trilogy of the Star Wars movies. And I'm going to throw it back to Miriam for a plot synopsis. Good luck, Miriam.
Yeah, this is going to be a huge mess. So the movie starts out with the bad guys showing up, the First Order showing up at the planet that all of the Resistance rebels are hanging out on. And so all the rebels are freaking out and trying to escape, and they're loading into their escape pods, which means we immediately get to see BB-8, which is great.
Yes.
Because BB-8 is the best part of all of these movies. And BB-8 is hanging out in Poe's ship as he's confronting the First Order and being extremely sassy. There's a really, really stressful scene with Rose, who's one of the main characters in this movie's sister, trying to drop a bunch of bombs because that's a thing that you can do in space now. Onto this huge ship called a fleet killer or a dreadnought. They destroy the ship, which is really cool, and Poe thinks he's like the best, and Leia is extremely mad at him, and so he gets demoted. While this is all going on, Luke has basically been hanging out, being very angsty on this island in Ireland, which is in... It's not actually in Ireland. It's like, it's got a really freaky... It's a weird name full of consonants, like Ankhto or something. It's where the Jedi originated, which is frankly a terrible place for the Last Jedi to hide out because the First Order can't find the Last Jedi at literally the home of the Jedis. I don't know. It's a bad place to hide, but that's where he is. And Rey's found him, and she's come to this island to get Luke to rejoin the rebel army to fight against the First Order, and he doesn't want to because he's still sad about how he turned Kylo Ren, aka Ben Solo, Han Solo's kid, into this evil bad guy. But he eventually realizes that Rey is really cool and has something special, and so he says he'll give her lessons, but then immediately regrets it when it turns out that she has anger like every person ever.
Wow, how dare she?
While all of that's going on, the Resistance, who had just barely managed to escape their planet, have jumped to light speed. And when they come out of light speed, like 30 seconds later, the First Order shows up, which is a very big deal because you're not supposed to be able to track people through light speed, but the First Order has done it. And they're running out of fuel, and they can't jump to light speed again because if they do, they'll have no fuel, and the bad guys will just blow them up. So there's a pretty epic fight scene when the First Order shows up again. They actually blow up the bridge of the main rebel ship, and we get probably one of the best moments in the movie where Leia gets to use the Force, and like a lot of the Force, because honestly, she's probably stronger with the Force than Luke or anybody else. And she floats back from the vacuum of space to the ship, despite like everyone else in the leadership of the rebels getting blown to pieces and flying away.
It's good to have that space magic.
Yeah, it's real good. It's very handy with the death in the movie. I don't know if we'll talk about that. Oh, I feel bad about saying that. Anyway, so the bad guys have blown up the bridge, and Leia rescues herself, but that takes a lot of energy, so she's unconscious for the next like big chunk of the movie. So the rebels need a new leader, and enters Vice Admiral Holdo, who is excellent and has purple hair. And then I guess we should talk about the world's worst side plot, main plot thing that happens where Finn and Rose come up with this like horrible, terrible plan to go to a casino on a planet, find a master codebreaker, come back, sneak onto the First Order ship, disable a computer so they can then tell the rebels, the resistance, to lightspeed again in the 6-minute window that they have where the First Order can't track them. It's really stupid. It's incredibly complicated. It's a waste of everyone's time. But that's what they're going to do for the rest of the movie. They get arrested. They escape getting arrested. They destroy a fancy casino. They find a person who's not this master codebreaker that they were supposed to find, who is still very good at breaking into and out of things, but has a questionable conscience and just does things for money. There's supposed to be some kind of like moral lesson there, I'm sure. They ride around in these really cute little, well, big cat horse things, and make a lot of statements about how money is bad. And while all of that is going on, while the rebels are fleeing the First Order and Finn and Rose are off destroying a casino, Rey and Kylo are having these very weird moments where they can see each other, but nothing else, and they can talk to each other, and they touch hands all special. Very bad at this, you guys.
You're killing it.
So Kylo and Rey are having these moments where they can see each other and not see anything else around them. And at one point, it becomes such a strong relationship in the Force that Kylo actually shows up in person as Luke walks into the room. And that freaks him out so much. And so Rey and Luke have a huge fight, and she just leaves because she's just like, F you, you're useless to me. I'm going to go try to turn Kylo and make him a good guy. And so she gets on the Millennium Falcon with a Porg and Chewie. Oh man, I should have talked about the Porgs. They're my favorite.
Well, we'll have a whole conversation about all the cute things. Because that's all I actually want to talk about.
Good, that's important. Okay, so Rey gets back in the Millennium Falcon with Chewie and a Porg and heads to the First Order ship where she plans to launch herself onto that ship and confront Kylo and try to turn him. All the while, the rebels are still running out of fuel as they try to outrun the bad guys. While that's all happening on the rebel ship, Poe stages a coup.
Yeah.
which like immediately fails because Leia comes back and shoots Poe. And all of the rebels start loading themselves on these additional transports because Vice Admiral Holdo actually had a pretty good plan despite Poe thinking that she's just running away. And all of the rebels start loading up on cloaked transport systems to go to a planet that's actually nearby, which used to be a secret rebel base. And it's really well guarded. It's got a huge door. It's like really well locked down. They hope that they can get down there and then send a distress signal and get someone to come save them. And the First Order will be none the wiser, which is actually a really solid plan. And the movie would have been 45 minutes long, and no one would have died if Poe wasn't such a dick. So the rebels are doing that, and it's going pretty well until Finn and Poe and Rose's terrible plan results in the con artist, master codebreaker guy that they found turning them over to the First Order and telling the First Order that the rebels are secretly trying to go down to this planet. And so instead of just firing on the main rebel ship, they start firing and blowing up the transports. And so this like group of 400 rebels that is left is like very rapidly getting picked down to being less and less and less. Then the coolest thing in the whole movie, Vice Admiral Holdo realizes what's happening. She turns around the rebel ship and sets it to go into lightspeed directly through the First Order's ship, which is so boss.
Yeah, super badass.
Freaking incredible. Somehow, though, that doesn't like immediately destroy the ship because it is so big. So we get all this moments of like flashback to Rey and Kylo. She's landed on the ship, on the First Order ship. She gets taken to Snoke, who is, I haven't mentioned because he's the least boring bad guy to ever exist. She gets taken to Snoke, who's telling her that she was all just a pawn in his scheme, and this like relationship that Kylo and Rey have through the Force is something that he devised, and all this other, he like monologues for a little while.
But that's always how villains get themselves killed too, man.
Oh man.
Keep your monologue short, do your hero murdering, and you would win. But, you know.
You'd think. And he has like, it's like a funny turn on that, because it's both like extremely predictable and funny, and that he's kind of saying, he's voicing what he sees Kylo doing, which is killing Rey, when in fact he is Force turning Rey/Luke's lightsaber to slice Snoke in half. And so the worst bad guy in the galaxy gets sliced in half extremely anticlimactically, because he's whatever. I guess there's a little bit of a buildup. It's fine. And then Rey and Kylo have a cool fight scene where they battle all of Snoke's guard people who have a collection of weird, useless weapons that I think were purely designed to look cool. All this while the ship is still like getting split in half. And then everyone miraculously gets off the ship, despite it being split in half. Rey gets in Snoke's pirate transport. BB-8 rides in on an AT walker or an AT-ST walker, chicken walker, whatever it is, and rescues Finn and Rose. They all get back to the Rebel base, where there's a whole nother movie that happens. So they all get off the ship that's gotten split in half by the lightspeed jump. They're down on the Rebel base, which importantly has this massive door that all the rebels... it's very silly. Rose and Finn managed to slide through the door right as it closes on a ship that they stole from the First Order. But because the First Order knows that they're sneaking down to this base, they come down with this massive giant cannon, and this door that was supposed to protect them does not stand a chance. There's another battle with these like rickety rust bucket ships. Hijinks ensue. Finn tries to like send his ship into the cannon, which wasn't going to work anyway, and Rose smashes him out of the way. There's a really forced kiss. Turns out no one has responded to the distress signal that the rebels sent out when they landed. There's a lot of talk about how the galaxy has lost all its hope, and this like rebels being the spark metaphor is used a lot. But then Luke shows up, and everybody, when I saw it the first time in theaters, everyone cheered very loudly. He goes out the giant hole that has been busted in the door by this battering ram cannon, and Kylo sees him and tells every single gun to fire on that spot. There's several jokes, but Luke shows up and just dusts off one shoulder. And then Kylo comes down and they start fighting, which then the rebels realize that Luke is doing all of this so that they can find a way to escape. And there's these cute little crystal foxes, and they realize, oh, they're going someplace. Let's follow them. And they sneak out the back to find a like pile of rocks that Rey, being impressive, force moves all of them because she's stronger than everybody, despite getting 2 classes in how to use the Force. So the rebels escape. Luke and Kylo are fighting, and then Kylo finds out that Luke's just a Force projection. He's real mad, but all the rebels have already gotten away. And then we go back to Luke on the island, and he like poofs away as the sun sets. But the rebels escape, so there can be another movie.
Yay!
That's all of it, I think.
Yeah.
Yay!
Oh man, I'm really sorry.
There's a lot. Yeah.
I think anything you missed or any kind of clunkiness belongs to the plot and not to you. You did a wonderful job. Thank you.
Yeah. There's a lot going on here.
I thought I knew the answer to this question before starting to record this episode, but now I'm not entirely sure after that plot synopsis. But we generally start with a basic question of, did you like this movie? And so now I'm very curious to hear both your, Miriam, and Nicole's answer. So I will pass it back to you guys and ask, did you guys like this movie?
So I really enjoyed it. I am also very curious to hear Miriam's thoughts, because I could tell from that synopsis that there were some things that you did not appreciate. And I think that the place that I am coming to these movies from probably frames a lot of the way in which I react to them. Like, I don't know, to me, like on the one hand, yes, like the clunkiness, like this plot had a lot going on, but like actually at their core, the stories here, like both in the first one and in this one, are like very simple. Like they're very simple, good and evil type stories. Like, I don't know. And so like to me, it's like this is a like big fun space romp. Shrug. And so yeah. I really enjoyed it. I saw it in the theater. It's the whole reason I watched the first movie was so I could go see it in the theater, and I enjoyed it. Watched it again today. Also had a fun time. So I am curious to hear, just to hear about all the things that didn't work for you guys. But yeah, Miriam.
Okay, so here's the thing. I am of like two minds when it comes to Star Wars, and that I like deeply love it. I like grew up watching it with my dad. It's like very, very nostalgic. I also I did enjoy this movie quite a bit, but like I am also the like other side is I am very critical of everything that exists in the whole world.
I can't relate.
So like I really enjoyed it. And I liked it when I left the movie. Like I saw it opening night at midnight. I like did the whole thing, buy the tickets early, show up. That's like, I love it. And I really enjoyed it then. I actually liked it more when I rewatched it alone in my apartment at like 2 a.m. last night. I liked it even more. And I think that doing the plot synopsis is a weird thing for me because that's not normally where I like think about whether or not I liked a movie. Like when I sat down to think about what's going on, I'm like, oh God, this is real silly. None of this makes sense. But like when I'm watching it, it's like the moments that happen that are like so Star Wars, as well as like some of the new things that have been injected now that it's like getting revamped. Like I love all of the new humor that's getting put into Star Wars, and I like all of like the really cool like smash a ship in half.
Yeah,
and I like
bang bang explosion. Wow.
Yeah, and as a viewer, I love all like the cheesy silly moments, and but I also like having studied film, I'm just like, oh God, this is really bad when you think about it.
Sure, yes. Having to explain the big dumb space romp is a very different thing than like just enjoying it.
I will say I thought the casino thing after the first time I watched it, and especially after the second time I watched it, I was like, this is really bad and they should have thought of something different here. But everything else, I mean, I liked the movie as a whole.
I didn't think that this was where it was going to end up, but I probably liked it the least out of both of you. Like I get it. I get like both sides of it. So like being the longtime fan and then having now this like new thing and having all of these new characters and just kind of having a fresh take on something that is, old and sentimental. And I get coming to it and just enjoying it for like a big fun space romp. I just don't necessarily get either of those experiences. And I don't want to sound like I didn't enjoy myself at all. I was just kind of bored sometimes, and I'm not fully invested in this characters or this story. I feel like after I watch the third one, or after the third one is out, there is going to be a third one, right? That's not something else.
Yes, there is, yeah.
That is a real thing that is happening.
Great. I feel like
there's going to be a Star Wars movie every year for the rest of our lives.
Perfect. Great. I feel like I can sit down and like binge these three and maybe have a little more of a fun time, but I don't know, even from watching The Force Awakens to The Last Jedi, there was enough time that I was coming back to, and I was like, oh, well, okay, I guess I'm doing this now. So I don't know. There's just something there that's not really connecting for me yet. I say question mark, kind of hopefully, but yeah, it was fine. I don't know. I don't even know what I'm going to say about this movie because I don't know how to feel about it.
I totally get what you're saying about like the time between so this is now the second time I have seen this movie, and last time I watched The Force Awakens for the podcast, and like that however many months ago that was, and like, yeah, so like a lot of time has passed, and that is my sole experience with the movie. I will say, to echo something that I said when we were talking about The Force Awakens, I hear the Star Wars theme music, and in my head I'm like, Star Tours? I'm going on Star Tours now? And then I was sad that I was just going to watch a movie and not go on a ride. But regardless,
Weird.
like, I want to be at Disneyland is actually the way that I felt when I heard the theme music. But that being said, one thing that I really enjoyed, and this is, I understand how this would not be enough to overcome the general feeling of just like not being invested in these characters and in this world. But I liked the fact that we opened with all of these big moments of like self-sacrifice, and also with grappling with what that meant, like the sort of the Poe versus Leia kind of like reactions to that. I don't know, like to me, for me, that was like instant, like, okay, yep, like I am invested in this. Like, even though I'm kind of ambivalent about all the characters who aren't BB-8, like I am still invested in like the idea of this just because of that opening. So I don't know. So like that is also a thing that like got me kind of immediately personally, but I definitely can see how the lack of investment and like just again like the simplicity of what is actually there. I don't know.
The best way that I can think to describe this in a way that I think Nicole will appreciate is that
Go on.
So I think that this in a lot of ways reminded me a lot of Doctor Who in terms of like strengths and weaknesses, where I think Doctor Who sucks at plots so bad. Like just in general, the way that it solves episodes.
No, that's definitely true.
Yeah, it just is not relying on its plots most of the time. It's relying on its character, your love of the Doctor, and these moments, like Miriam was saying. So like very emotional, very tense moments. It scares you sometimes. It makes you laugh sometimes. So it's a show that is strung together by very, very powerful moments. And in between is a bunch of weak plot and like no science whatsoever. So like that, I think, is the same of my experience coming to this movie, except for me, for whatever reason, I was able to buy in early enough with Doctor Who that I actually care about the Doctor and his companions and everything that is going on there. And here, while there are some characters that I really do like Rey, but in general, it's kind of like, shrug, like, you know, Rey could die tomorrow and it wouldn't really break my heart or anything. And all of the characters, I'm like, oh, look, a big deal, they might die, but I don't actually care if anybody dies. So it's just kind of hard for me to like wait for those moments with all of this really crappy plot in between, because I'm not invested in those moments.
I feel like I want to pause for like a brief like SnarkSquad backstory, which is like if you're just coming to us for the podcast and like don't read the recaps and stuff, Doctor Who was like a heartbreaking recapping experience for me, because I knew how much everyone loved this thing, and I went into it so primed and ready to love this thing, and like episode after episode I fucking hated it. Like I kept waiting for the moment where like the magic was gonna come alive for me, and it just like never happened. And like that was the first time that we all kind of collectively were like, yeah, you should just stop watching this. Like this isn't fun for anybody. Like me coming in and being like, well, that was stupid, and that was also stupid, and like, you know, whatever. So yes. So back to Ari's original point of like making a comparison that like makes this all register and resonate with me. Totally, I super get it, and I definitely see how this could be that kind of thing.
I'll never forget that there was a point, it might have even been like the end of series 1 of Doctor Who. So I think the last episode was the Doctor Dances, and you sent me like a text message and was like, I didn't hate that. And then you opened up the recap and you're like, there's a 5,000 word recap. I hate everything. Like I didn't hate it until now I have to do work with it. And I was like, okay, fair. Probably stop watching this now.
Oh man, I do not want to open the can of worms that is my Doctor Who feelings. But to like pull it back to Star Wars a little bit, I think that kind of like to bridge your two feelings, and I may be totally off base here, but like for me, it seems I'm very interested to see what happens in the coming movies now that all of the old characters are gone, because a lot of these past two movies have been like, here's the moment where the people in the theater are going to clap because Han Solo is on screen, or here's where Luke shows up. And so like they're both having to balance the like emotional weight of these stories and characters that people have really grown to love over literal decades, and these new characters who could be really interesting, and they're starting to treat them with like a lot of care, and like Poe and Finn and Rose and Rey all have like very distinct like peopleness, but there's not enough time for them to be explored because there's these giant characters that everyone's put so much stuff into. And so like for me, like some of the silliest moments in the plot always happen at like when those like two worlds collide a little bit. And I feel like that makes it really hard to like the new people as much as everyone else likes the old people.
Yeah, totally. Yes.
I love that so much, because I feel like when we were watching the first movie, we talked about how for both Nicole and I coming to this world new, some of those moments didn't have the same emotional impact. Like it was very clear, it was very telegraphed that this was like a big moment. We were supposed to be feeling something, but we didn't have that investment or that context. But they were also some of the weaker moments to me in the movie. They were some of the weaker moments dialogue wise as well. And I don't know that I necessarily picked up on that here in the second movie, but now it makes so much sense to me too, that the things that I'm probably more interested and invested in don't have the room that they should have in order to really sink themselves into my feelings. Like I don't have enough time. We're not only bouncing around between all of these like failed plans and plots, but now, there's so many characters to share screen time with that it becomes very difficult, I think, to ingratiate these characters, for them to kind of like settle in your feelings.
Yeah, because I guess the only characters that are still around are the robots and Chewie for the next movies. So
Carrie Fisher passed before they started production on the next movie. Is that like how is that?
I'm not entirely sure, because I think that like they're not shooting them entirely not like perfectly in order. So they may have shot some things. They have said that they're not going to include like in the Force Awakens there was all those, and in the one in the middle names. They have said that they're not going to include like a digital version of her like they have in previous movies of other characters. So it seems like if she shows up at all, it will be very briefly.
Got it. That makes sense.
I have, for emotional reasons, not read a bunch about it. I don't know if we want to talk about that, but I, as like a person who's been a fan of Star Wars for a really long time, think that they did a really like wonderful job almost eulogizing her a little bit in this movie, because I know a lot of people went into it expecting that she was going to die in the movie. And the fact that she didn't, and they still treated her character as this like, I'm actually very curious to see how much of it they changed before and after, like especially like with the Force moment where she's flying back to space. It just like as someone who has been watching these movies and like watching her for so long, it felt very special. But I don't know if that's like a sentiment that either of you would have felt, having not like grown up with this.
The gravity of her character, I think, definitely comes across in this movie, like even without having the sort of prior context. Although, and we talked about this with The Force Awakens too, though, that it's hard, like that character is on the list of characters that are just so deeply embedded in like the broader like pop culture universe of American pop culture that even without ever seeing any of the other movies, like it's not like you come into this like I have no idea who Leia is, right? So I don't know. I actually have no idea what it is to come into this with completely zero context, because I don't know that that's even like possible. I don't know.
Yeah, I imagine it'd be very difficult, especially growing up in like an English speaking space.
Yes. Growing up in America,
even not, but like growing up in the US, especially.
In the US, I don't know how you could. And I guess coming to these movies as like an actual child, right? Like if these came out when you were a child and you like didn't have time to ever encounter the previous stuff, is kind of the only way that I can fathom. Like I can't imagine being 30 years old and being like, well, I don't know who the fuck Leia is as an English speaker in the United States. Can't wrap my head around that.
We can probably ask somebody to add us on Twitter and someone will appear and be like,
that's
Leia who?
True. That's true. Like if you are that person, like I am curious.
I mean, like the Venn diagram of people that listen to this podcast and people who haven't heard of Leia.
Okay,
I can't imagine.
We said that about Game of Thrones, and there was somebody who did not know about Ned.
Wow.
Ned being executed, which I was sure that like even if you didn't ever watch the show or read the books, like that would be information you would have. But like, I don't know, man. You know,
how do you do that? I want to disconnect like that.
Right, like more power to you. I do not have that.
We spent a lot of the first podcast on The Force Awakens talking about Rey as a character and as a hero. So I'm curious how you felt she progresses in this movie character-wise, and then also because a lot of her arc is around how powerful she is, and then also kind of going back and forth with Kylo Ren, which he was another person we had a lot of feelings about. So what do you guys think?
I think that her like development and growth in the first movie is a lot better than in this one. I think because they spend so much time on that casino place that we don't experience as much of Rey's growth as I would have liked to see, especially because I am at the point where I'm like ready to see these new characters doing their things, and I guess that like maybe this movie was Finn and Rose's time to shine. But I was very bummed out that all of the times that we got to experience like Rey, it was either like through some kind of like Luke lens or Kylo lens, which felt boring to me, especially because she was so independent and powerful in the first movie. I don't super know where I'm going with this.
That's really interesting. I hadn't thought about that until you said it, but like I mean, I still have not thought about this any more than just hearing you say it. So, but my immediate reaction to that is that it rings true that her portrayal in this movie is very wrapped up in either Luke or Kylo, like, and how she is sort of seen by one of the two of them, like that is her framing in this movie, and that is which is very, very different than like watching her be the scrappy problem solver that we saw her be in the first movie. And I don't yet know how I feel about that, but it definitely feels true. I also, back to her being like the scrappy problem solver, it is always I don't know, I'm down with like the space magic being this like weird thing that doesn't really make any sense, and you can kind of, you know, wave it this way or that to like move the plot. Like I'm totally on board for that. That is not a thing that bothers me in any way. However, consuming enough stories with like weird magical elements, whenever the magic starts doing weird shit, you should be suspicious of it. I like the reveal that Snoke was the one who was manipulating it to happen. I was like, well, you shouldn't be that surprised. Like, why were you not more suspicious of what was causing this? I don't know. So if you ever find yourself suddenly a magical being, and then your magic starts doing something that it didn't used to do, I don't know, maybe just be suspicious. That's my life advice for would-be chosen magical ones.
I mean, that's something that also like very much irks me. Like Snoke says that he's doing it, but it still happens after Snoke has died. At the very end. And so I was just like, is this just like everything surrounding Snoke is just silly and wrong? I really think Snoke is the worst villain that ever existed. In that he's a very, very bad and like not like he's evil, but bad in that he's like not a good.
Yeah.
There needs to be another word here, but he's terrible written.
That's fine. Sometimes things are just so bad that that's it.
It gave me a lot of Harry Potter and Voldemort vibes the whole time. So I was just like, oh man, close off your mind. Come on. And mostly also because on the other side of that was Kylo Ren, who surprising probably no one, I hate even more after this movie. Oh my God. And not in story, folks, not because he's like this amazing villain to me. I think, I just cannot stand him. If somebody were to punch him in the face, they would be doing me a great favor. I really don't like him. And I think that a lot of what was shared between, I can kind of see what they were going for with Rey, especially because her time was shared between these two dudes, and that wasn't amazing. But I think they were going for some kind of play on, like, you know, the push and pull of who she could be. And, you know, she's reaching out at this point. She doesn't know who her parents are. She's kind of looking for direction and leadership. And on that spectrum are these two guys, Luke Skywalker and Kylo Ren. But it didn't play out well to me on screen. And I agree that there was something lost for me there because I loved her in the first movie, but her plots were a little bit boring to angry making for me in this one. And I hated everything about the mindshare with Kylo Ren. So
yeah, the mindshare was probably my least favorite component of this movie as well. Not like, I don't know, I didn't hate it, but I also was just like shrug, I don't know, of all of the things that I could have done without, probably that would be at the top of my list.
Not the casino?
Not the casino. I don't know. I am aware of the casino thing being divisive among Star Wars fans. This is knowledge that I have come across prior. I don't know. I agree with the point that it is a sort of weird diversion. For sure, more time with Rey, cool, whatever. But I liked the idea of it as a way to show more elements of this world. Again, because I have only seen the world as it has been shown to me in these two movies, so I have no other context for the world. So that was kind of cool. And I don't know, Finn's whole plot of like getting to that moment where he says, I'm rebel scum. I like it. I don't know. Like it's simple, but like in a way that I enjoy it. I'm trying to think of how to articulate this. To me, the weaknesses of that are kind of the same as the weaknesses of all of this stuff. Like it's simple, and it's simple while also being over the top. Like it's and I don't know, like there are things about it that you kind of have to like there are pieces that don't really make a ton of sense, but whatever. It's like you're getting to, at the heart of it, you're getting to this like very sort of pure story of like somebody coming into their own. And so, I don't know, that to me, I enjoyed what they were going for with that enough that the sort of silliness and absurdity of it didn't bother me. Again, because I think I just find everything in these movies to be sort of silly and absurd in a way that it's hard for me to differentiate what things people are like, no, this I accept, but like this, no, that's too much. That thing that they did, that's just absurd. I don't know. I'm like, all of this is fucking silly and absurd. And like, that's what I'm enjoying about it. Like, I think it's fun. But I don't know how you can look at it and see like what the line is for other people. That's the thing that I'm like losing. And again, probably because I don't have the context of, years of being in this fandom or whatever. But for me, I was chill with this weird, nonsensical casino side plot. Also because it gave us more cute creatures, which is my actual favorite thing about these movies. This movie had a bunch of cute creatures, which was awesome. Because the first movie, BB-8, totally the best character. But now BB-8 gets the porgs, the crystal critters, and the things on the casino planet. What are
Faithers?
they?
Faithers? Faithers? I don't know if that's how you pronounce it. They're cat horses.
Cat horses. Yeah, the cat horses. They are. So, I was fine with the casino plot.
To like defend my hatred of the casino plot. It's not the silliness that goes on there that gets me. Like, I loved everything that happens there, except for I have some like qualms with the like how they talk about the people there. But like the silliness and the hijinks, I am all for it 100%. I just think that the underlying idea that they have to go find some code breaker is just like ridiculous. Like had the plot been they needed to go to this place to get like a physical thing, I think I would have been fine with it. But the fact that they had to like go find a code breaker when like theoretically like the rebels are able to do literally everything else.
Right.
And like the fact that like all of a sudden this is the one thing that they don't have a person for.
Okay.
That's the moment where I was like, I don't accept that, which like plays into your whole like, why do people not accept? And I was like, why the heck? Like they can do everything else. Why can't they do this one thing? And because it was like they needed a person, and all he needed to have was a bunch of like lock picking keys. So.
All right, that's fair. I at least I understand your line now. So that's
yeah. So that's my line in the sand.
Another thing that I am aware of now I'm just like, I'm so excited that we have somebody who actually cares about Star Wars. So I can be like, this is a thing that I heard people have feelings about. And instead of Mari and I just going back and forth, like, I don't know, why would people have feelings about that? The other thing is Rey's parentage. Rey's not having like special parents. And so I'm going to start this with my sort of take on it, but I'm curious to hear everybody else's thoughts on this. I know that there are people who didn't like that her parents were basically nobody. I am of the opinion that was cool. Again, without maybe there's like Star Wars-y reasons why, but I don't know. To me, even those reasons, like that argument sounds bad to me because you did that story. Like you did Luke Skywalker's story, right? So like of him and how like he was actually super special because of his parentage or whatever. And so to me, the idea that like Rey is no one from nowhere and ostensibly has no place written into this story, but like actually she does anyway, because like that feels like it jives with the whole like rebel ethos, like this whole idea of like people rising, the little guy rising up against, the big bad evil. And so I don't know, like that to me seemed really cool and good. And so that was my feeling. I was a fan of that component of the story, but I'm curious how you guys felt about it.
So I'm going to start off by saying one little actually.
Okay.
Be really obnoxious.
Yes.
So like, I totally agree with you. And I think that the Rey being from nobody is great. However, and not to like bring up the prequels.
Go for it.
But that's like Anakin's whole storyline. Like he's a nobody from this like Dust Bowl planet. All he does is race little pod racers and fix up cars. And he's a nobody who has this great power and then turns into Darth Vader. However, I do agree with you that I don't think it's
he like genetically. I've not seen these movies either, but I listened to the 3 real bad episodes about the prequels.
Right.
So that's where my knowledge is coming from. But something happened to him, right? Like,
so there's this like split that the new movies are trying to get away from, and that like the old way that you became a Jedi is that you had a high midichlorian count. Which is like a weird spelling of mitochondria or something. And that's like how you have one with the Force. And it's really bad. And I think that like, a lot of people who like Star Wars think it's good, but like a lot of other people think it's silly. And it was a terrible reason for why people should be like, have the power of the Force. And they
it's just fucking magic. Just let it be fucking magic.
Yeah, no, they like aggressively tried to push away from that in this movie with that whole scene where like Luke and Rey were just sitting on the rocks and he was like, feel it all around you and it's like moving through you. And just like some people are basically better meditators and can access it than others, as opposed to it being like a genetic thing that you have, which is I think why some people are so mad that she's from nobody. But like Anakin, he had the thing, but he wasn't like a somebody either.
Okay.
That was just because like George Lucas came up with a bad idea and people liked it for some reason.
Got it.
Sorry.
No, I appreciate this is what I'm saying because I'm glad we have somebody to provide us with this context.
Had you not been here, Nicole and I would have just ridden that wave like, yep. Oh my God, this legit must be true.
It's like I love Star Wars, but I hate almost everything about it. I don't know. There's something weird going on here.
I really liked the parentage thing as well, and not knowing anything about Anakin and I don't know anything about anything really. I liked it too, just in the context of this movie, because I think it's another way that they're using Rey to foil Kylo Ren. And so Kylo Ren has the parentage and all of this power, and he's choosing the dark side. And then, Rey is nobody from nowhere, and she also has all of this power. So I liked that little dynamic. That was fine with me. The other reason that I really liked the whole Rey thing was I think that for these movies happening now in this cultural moment, I think it's really cool that it's like a nobody from nowhere being part of this rebellion and just kind of having the power and, fighting against probably Nazis. Like, I don't know. I just thought that like it's a cool thing that you can see on screen and be like, oh man, like I'm nobody from nowhere too. And I think that's like a special thing, especially I feel now for this moment when these movies are coming out.
Oh yeah, I totally agree. Also, they're definitely Nazis. They're like, they're not even like alluding to it. They've got like the same armbands and the same like marching style. They're like definitely Nazis.
Good.
While I am bringing you guys the list of things that I heard people didn't like, the other thing that I was told that people disliked about this movie was that they killed Snoke off without telling us who exactly he is, because he's like the worst villain ever. But yeah, I my feeling on that is that I don't care. I don't care about Snoke like at all. I don't know if anybody else cares about him at all, but I super don't.
Nope.
Yeah, no, not at all.
Okay.
In that moment when he's like cut in half and that whole thing happened, I like knew enough in my brain that it was like kind of anticlimactic, I think. And it was just kind of like, oh, well, he's dead now. But in my heart, it was like, yeah, I don't care. That was probably for the best. Like, yeah, I super didn't care about him either.
I mean, I think that he's going to like, I don't know how familiar you are with the prequels, if at all. Like, does Darth Maul mean anything to you?
I know this name.
Nope.
Yes.
It's the guy with like the red face and the spikies.
Yes.
So like he also has like a whole backstory in all of the books and everything else, and like people had a lot of feels about that. I mean, I think people had a lot of feels. I was quite young when that movie came out, but like he's nothing. Like kids dressed up with him for one Halloween, and I think it's the same with Snoke. Like, yeah, he's got a bunch of stuff going on in the books that Disney actually said isn't canon anymore anyway, and then they just made him incredibly boring in all of these movies, and so the sooner they kill him off, the better, honestly.
yeah. Get rid of that. There is one other thing that I really liked about this movie that I wanted to mention, which is the idea of narrative control of a given event. So the fact that we revisited the moment where Kylo Ren destroys the temple or whatever 3 different times, that to me, I thought was really, really cool and interesting. Like, I liked the idea that you have sort of Luke's initial telling, which is the version that he would like to believe of how that happened. Kylo Ren's version, which is, he showed up and was trying to murder me, and then sort of Luke's final version. And I mean, I think this movie does appear to take the position that third instance is the actual correct version of what happened. I think that kind of undercuts what I find most interesting about it, but I still think it's really interesting to sort of revisit a moment through different perspectives. Like, I thought that was cool and interesting, and I liked it. I don't know how essential it is in terms of the larger narrative. It's like just like another sort of little thread that happens among the million threads. But for what it was, I enjoyed it.
I will say that part of my problem with Kylo Ren is that I'm not entirely sure that I understand his capital T tragedy and why I just don't. His backstory is like missing for me in some way. Like, I don't get why. Before coming to this movie, I knew that there was like a emo Kylo Ren Twitter, and I didn't. I didn't like. Part of me was kind of almost defensive about that, because I think that as an emotional person, I always get defensive when people call like someone emotional, and it's like, you know what, whatever, people have feelings. And also about a male villain, like they were making fun of him in that way. I wanted to be okay with Kylo Ren, but I get why people like made an emo Kylo Ren Twitter. So his tragedy is kind of nebulous to me. I don't know really what it's getting at, but I think that moment was one of the ones where I could really see where Ben Solo was coming from, for him to wake up and turn around and see his, teacher, his uncle, standing over him with a lightsaber, like how that affected him. And I think that was shown to me, and that actually worked because of revisiting that moment in those 3 different ways. So it was one of the probably few narrative moments in his backstory that I really appreciated. And it's true. It's like that entire idea of like a moment or a memory is different depending on who's telling it, and from the perspective that you come at it from.
Yeah. I really think those flashback moments are a very solid argument for the Star Wars movies are getting better over time. Like, I legitimately think that while I love all the old ones, that these newer ones are quite a bit better in a lot of ways than the originals. Maybe not in like nostalgia-ness, but like in actual storytelling. And it's moments like those that like I can see what they're trying to get at with Kylo, and like that shape the story in a different way, that like if once they, maybe they won't decide to make the plots better, but like if they had a really solid plot and moments like those, like these would be incredible films. Like switch from movies to pretentious films, Yeah. But the one thing that I'll say about Kylo is that like I feel like they are trying to tell us that he's actually quite young, and he's being like what is the person's name who is the actor?
Adam Driver.
Adam Driver is clearly putting on his like most boyish faces, and like Snoke calls him a boy.
Snoke
like
calls him a boy, and I'm like, he's in his 30s.
He's in his 30s. I think that like had this character been younger, which is how I think that they like are imagining him, this would have felt a lot more powerful to me. And that like he all of his actions, like if you switched him out for like a 17-year-old boy, I think it'd be like an entirely different story, and maybe a better one. Also maybe make me like question a lot of like, we'd have to have another conversation about like child violence and stuff, but
he'd be Prince Zuko versus like Kylo Ren. And we talked about that when we were watching Avatar, about how because he was a child, like coming into himself, these were like big coming of age things. But when you have a 30-year-old putting on, as Miriam so wonderfully said, his most boyish faces, it really has a different effect than probably what they were going for.
Yes.
And if you do the math of like how old are all these older characters, like he has to be pretty young. Like they have not said ages for a very good reason, but like he has to, like technically speaking, he would have to be quite young for like all of this to have happened and everyone to still be around.
Right.
And like kicking,
Yeah, that's an interesting point. I that also jumped out at me too, and this not so much on the first time that I watched it, but when I was rewatching it, when Snoke called him a boy, I was like, "What?" I was actually surprised that I actually looked up Adam Driver's age, and I was surprised that he's only 34. I thought he was later, at least a few years older than that, but definitely does not look a day under 30. So I don't,
Apparently he's supposed to be 29, which is according to the internet.
Okay.
And Rey is supposed to be 19.
Oh.
Interesting.
So.
Oh, that makes me hate the shipping even more. Jesus. Why? Why?
The only acceptable ship is Poe and Finn. But
the OTP. You mentioned being an emotional person. The only other thing that I wrote down is, and like, again, coming back to what I enjoy about this is just like the simplicity of it. Like they're very simple, good and evil type stories. And, I don't think that is the only kind of story that we should be telling, but it is. Like, I appreciate it for being that. And when I was rewatching it today, I had a rough couple weeks, you guys. I legitimately started crying at the end. It is, as Miriam pointed out in her synopsis, it is ultimately a very stupid scene. The moment where Rose hits Finn's plane and they have the forced kiss and like all of that's dumb. However, the line that is like thesis-y, and I love like, you know, these like media thesis moments where like you encapsulate your story in some like really great little like quotable, oh man, dramatic moment. And I just, that whole line, that's how we're gonna win, not by fighting what we hate, but saving what we love. I was like, that's beautiful. So I don't know if that is a comment on the movie or on like the rough couple weeks that I've had. Unclear, but I wrote it down, and so I'm mentioning it.
I mean, that line would have been so much better if the kiss hadn't happened.
Right.
It's like, I mean, I feel like there's like 3 lines in the movie that's like that. There's Kylo Ren yelling, "Let the past die, kill it if you have to." And then there's Leia saying, "The galaxy has lost all of its hope and the spark is out." And then there's the line that Rose says. And like all those 2 other lines happen with like so much like real emotion feeling to me of like both sides of the spectrum of like despair and like passion. And then this one's like, it could have been like either like platonic or romantic love, but like I'm really hurt. But instead it was like, here's this weird kiss and then I'm gonna say it.
Yeah, totally.
Which is such a shame.
And then pass out. Which was the moment where I started laughing, where she was like, delivered the line and then like, and passed out. I was like, oh buddy.
Yeah.
And the thing is that I think it stands out so much, like the forced kiss and all that, because they're doing such a great job with Finn and Rey, and like that friendship and them just caring about each other and running out and like hugging each other, like that whole thing, like that I think had so much more emotional weight than like the kiss and the pass out kind of thing. So it stands out to me so much more. And the other thing that kind of caught me by surprise, I was reminded because talking about that scene is when Poe meets Rey and is like, "Hey, I'm Poe," and I was like, "Oh my God, they haven't met yet." Right? Like I hadn't, like so much had happened that I completely lost sight of the fact that these 2 people had not even been introduced. So I thought that was a neat moment as well, and it kind of pulls together that for as you know, whether you think it's clunky or whether you're enjoying yourself, a lot is happening, and there's like a big rebellion and a big showdown going on. And so to have that moment where these 2 main characters are finally introduced, I thought was really neat as well.
Yeah.
I also love that they did it with like a joke. I mean, I feel like the one thing that a lot of people, this is another thing that people didn't like. A lot of people thought there was too many jokes in this movie. And it was honestly one of my favorite things, like from the get-go of Poe taunting General Hux, like all the way to the end of Poe and Rey meeting. It's just like such like legitimately well-written comedy in a way that like big sci-fi fantasy movies often have a hard time with. I mean, I guess if we're in the age of like the Avengers movies where everything's a quip, but
sure.
I liked that it came into Star Wars like even more than it was in The Force Awakens in this movie.
Yes, I also, agree.
Miriam, anything else that you wanted to touch on that we haven't talked about?
I mean, we could talk about the porgs being puffins, but that's really the only other fun thing.
So the only other things we have is how things are other things. But,
well, that's like everyone hated the porgs, but then and they're like, this is just so Disney can. Well, the really funny like backlash to the backlash, right? Like so on Twitter, when the first trailer dropped, everyone was like, ugh, crap, this is just Disney trying to sell more plushies. When the porg shows up and yells next to Chewie in the original trailer. Then
I want a porg plushie.
I mean, same.
Marketing effective.
But like, and then the porgs were like very delightful in the movie. But it turns out the reason that they have the porgs is because the island that they shot on in Ireland is covered in puffins and they're protected. And so instead of like trying to shoot where there weren't any puffins, they just put porgs on top of the puffins. They just put porgs on top of the puffins and like made these cute little characters just exist in the world.
That is beautiful.
That is amazing.
I love it so much. Oh, wow.
No,
and wait, hold on. Can you buy a plushie or?
Oh, for sure. Yes. You can also definitely buy a plushie. It's like best of both worlds.
Amazing.
This is going to be, I'm going to like, my Twitter is just going to be full of people sending me links to plushies. Somebody sent me like an 18-inch Appa plushie.
Oh, man, yeah.
Amazon link as well. So amass a collection of stuffed animals from stuff we've watched. Anyway.
Yeah. That's the only other really delightful thing.
That was indeed very delightful.
On that delightful note, we are going to end this episode here. Thank you so much to Miriam for joining us today, and thank you to all of you for listening. If you enjoyed this episode, we ask you to please rate and review us on iTunes, share the podcast with your friends. We would really appreciate it, and come and share your thoughts about this episode and about The Last Jedi over on SnarkSquad.com. You can also find us on Twitter at Snark_squad. You can find me at My Name is Marines.
I am at Sweeney Says.
I'm at Zentoro. If you can spell that, you can talk to me on the internet.
Thank you to Stefan Chin, as always, for the theme music that is currently playing us out. And we will be back with another new episode next week. Bye.
Bye.